cannabis industry is relatively young. It still is. It's got a long way to go before it can be compared to other well-established industries, but it is actively and very fast growing. So rather than give too much of an overview of the kind of headlines you would normally find, what we hope to achieve today is to focus in on a kind of case study or a practical example of how the actual mechanics of this industry are functioning right now. Some things to note: the black market in cannabis is far larger than the legal market. So a lot of times I hear parents, I'm a parent, being concerned about cannabis as an industry. And the way I would describe it as, a lot of the young folks right now are getting their supply from the black market, which can be laced and it can be deadly and have a lot of dangers. And really, the restrictions to the industry, to a large part, exist because of the black market. So the black market and abuse of and illegal use of cannabis is one of the biggest overhangs on the legal cannabis side of the business. Some of the key milestones that were hit in the COVID period, one of them was the essential status that cannabis gained. When we were in the depths of the lockdown, cannabis was deemed essential. That word changed the industry forever. And I remember seeing that in the news and really connecting with it and having a lot of conversations around that. The Democrats winning control has made a significant difference. I think there is support for the cannabis industry from both parties, and I'm not making a political statement, but in terms of the theme that the Democrats have picked up on, especially around social justice for this issue, as well as one of my points here, the deficits that governments are facing from the local level all the way up to the federal level, that have been exacerbated by COVID. All of these factors are very strong tailwinds for the cannabis industry.
We believe that, over the next 2 to 4 years, you're going to see these new genetics that are going to be bred by breeders that are going to be really powerful for growing for formulary. So growing for an ingredient that's going into either an over-the-counter drug or a rec product.
We've been tracking CBD sales and CBD search terms since early 2019. And here's a quick chart showing some of the numbers over the past 12 to 18 months. We've seen consumer interest pick up quite significantly, actually, especially over the last 6 months. And this is also demonstrated actually if you look at the Chinese FDA filings for applications with CBD or something related that have cannabinoids in the name. While people might not usually associate cannabis with China, which is true because THC is not allowed in China, a different form of cannabinoid legalization and emergence of a consumer category is happening right now. So what we're doing is that we're actually bringing our own brand working with US formulators and manufacturers to sell into China. What we're doing is we're creating a localized Chinese brand using all the local channels such as Douyin, which is TikTok in China, Redscope, which would be something like a Pinterest, but basically leveraging very domestic strategies in order to build up the brand awareness as well as education about the cannabinoid products themselves.
Well, our mission essentially is delivering quality cannabis to patients who need it. That's the mission, that's the mantra, and we are one of the leading European innovators in the industry. Now, I'll come back on what that innovation means, because we actually do not grow product ourselves. We distribute, import, export, manufacture, deal with patients, discuss with doctors, and help growing the market and help growing supply. This is a slide about Europe. Obviously, we're in the UK and Ireland. The orange bit are the countries that we think and planning to go to next. Germany is one of them. Germany being a market that is slightly ahead of the UK in terms of access and in terms of numbers of patients. Scandinavia is behind that, and then Poland, Italy are behind again. But this is the bigger picture with what we see as the addressable market in the future. So we locally manufacture, for example, for a company called like Columbia Care, who are quite big in the US already, and chose the UK as their kind of starting point about going into Europe. All of these things have the patient at a focus, where we want to facilitate clinical trials that companies want to do. We engage ourselves in setting up clinical trials to generate that database of evidence that will then help grow the market and convince insurance companies or the NHS or NICE about taking these products up and reimbursing them. Research and development fits into that. And you mentioned at the start that Grow Group has several companies underneath. So we have Grow Biotech, Grow Pharma, Grow Trading, and Grow International, I would say, Grow Health. Grow Biotech is the research and development arm in that. And we don't do research and development into patients and efficacy with patients, but what we look at is how we can help suppliers and growers to increase their yield on the crops, how to make the extraction of the cannabinoids more efficient. What that will do is that will reduce cost of goods. Reducing cost of goods will then go into the whole supply chain, and ultimately patients will benefit from lower prices and better access. It's quite interesting to see how the UK is almost becoming the epicenter of European cannabis. We obviously see the Tilray Grow relationship. We saw Jazz by GW, which is a UK company, and I think you very correctly talked about why the reasons for Jazz doing that. And then the London Stock Exchange has now opened up for cannabis companies. So we've seen MGC Pharma, and I think this week also Cannabis going on to the London Stock Exchange, which helps for investors and for companies who want to look into companies like us.
Point that Brian just raised about the strict restrictions in China to make sure their THC content is below a certain level. What are some of the challenges for the cultivator that you guys look at when they're in that market, in the CBD market, and they need to make sure that their final yield when they harvest is not going to lead to violation of these restrictions, or if the processor then gets that material, how does that aspect work?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, it's a very serious issue. And if you just look back to last year and the year before, we saw a lot of U.S. hemp farmers end up growing crops that went hot. And what that means is they went above the allowable THC content in those crops and they were wiped out. So it's playing out every day in that community. And so it's so critical that that when you're getting into cultivation, that you have a consistent, reliable set of genetics that you can rely on, that they won't go hot and they won't grow above that THC content. And